Thanks, Chris, and thanks to you for tuning in. We begin tonight with breaking news. For the first time, the Supreme Court will take up the issue of gay marriage. It's a major step into one of the key civil rights issues of our time. The court announced today it will rule whether a federal law denying benefits to same-sex spouses is unconstitutional. That's part of a law from 1996, the Defense of Marriage Act, defining marriage as the legal union of one man and one woman. The court also announced it will decide whether California's Proposition 8, which bans same-sex marriage, is constitutional. Voters in California passed Prop 8 4 years ago, but since then, two courts have said it is unconstitutional. Americans' views on this issue have shifted rapidly to where the majority of Americans now support same-sex marriage. The cases will be heard in March. A ruling is expected in June. These decisions will have huge implications for fairness in this country. One reporter described this case as the Roe versus Wade of gay rights, and we will all be tracking it very closely. We have three special guests tonight. Joining me now is Richard Socarides, a former White House advisor to President Clinton and former president of Equality Matters, a gay rights advocacy group. Dustin Lance Black, LGBT activist and Academy Award-winning screenwriter of the movie Milk. He's helped to lead the charge to overturn Proposition 8. And Jonathan Capehart, opinion writer for the Washington Post and an MSNBC contributor. Let me first thank all of you for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Red.
Thanks.
Richard, what does this mean for same-sex marriage? Are you hopeful about how the Supreme Court will decide?
Well, I think it's a very important day because we're beginning to see where the Supreme Court is headed on this. And what they told us today is that they are ready to decide this issue. I know that, this is a legal thing, and only in Supreme Court is it important when they tell you that they're ready to decide. But it was a very significant moment. The Supreme Court said these are the cases we will take, and we are ready to decide this issue. And because they are ready to decide this issue, and because the arc of history is so clear, I'm very optimistic that they will decide in favor of an expansive view of marriage rights for all Americans.
Now, Dustin, do you share that optimism, and are you more cautious? And what happens if they decide yay on one, nay on the other? They took two shots at this.
Well, I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think it's very clear, especially after November 6th, and seeing 4 states vote in favor of marriage equality, to see where the polls land today, to see where the arc of history is headed. The Supreme Court likes to be maybe 2 steps ahead, not 10. But they certainly don't want to be behind the arc of history again when it comes to civil rights and equality in this nation. They've seen that dark day in that court, and they don't want to see it again. I think they know this is a can they can't keep kicking. And I think the American people want equality, and not just in California, and not just state by state. I think we want to see a nation that's no longer a checkerboard nation. We want to see a nation where you're free and your family is protected and respected no matter what state you live in.
So if the court decides in favor of gay marriage, this will really mean that the state by state situation is over. This will make it national law. Explain the law to us, Richard.
Well, we don't know
of both these cases.
We don't know exactly what the court's going to decide. But
right.
if the court rules in a broad sense in the Proposition 8 case, it could mean that same-sex marriage had to be eventually legal everywhere. There are options for more limited rulings. For instance, if it just tackled the substantive issues in the Defense of Marriage Act case, it would just mean that in the states where same-sex marriage is already legal, that the federal government had to recognize it. But what this court was saying today was that it was going to. What the court was saying today is that they were going to look at a range of options, but they were going to look at all of these options on the merits, and that they were going to fully consider what it means to be an American and what equality means for same-sex couples. So we're very optimistic that in June we will have a ruling.
What is the difference between these cases? Why take two cases? What is the legal issue that differs differs between the two cases that the court will be looking at?
Well, the Defense of Marriage Act is a federal statute which says the federal government cannot recognize valid marriages in states that recognize same-sex marriage. And Proposition 8 is a law, a California law, which says that only marriages between heterosexuals are recognizable in California. So the issue presented by the California 8 case, if it is decided broadly, that's a big if, but if it is decided broadly, could affect every state, because if you know what's good for California is good for the other 49 states.
Jonathan Capehart, I heard both Richard and Dustin very optimistic. I was recently at the court and looked at that of those 9 as I listened to the arguments on affirmative action case to hearing right now about a month ago. In fact, it was 8 because one had to recuse themselves. When I look at that bench and I see judges there, do you think that they go with the arc of the future? I mean, we are talking about Scalia and Clarence Thomas. We're talking about some judges that could be scary.
Yes, they could be scary, and they very well might be scary. But the key justice in all of this is going to be Justice Kennedy. He's the one who eloquently wrote in 2003 in the Lawrence v. Texas case, the sort of saying that the dignity of gay men and lesbians should not be trampled upon by the federal government. And it was that ruling that set off Justice Scalia, who said in 2003 that because of what the majority wrote in that opinion, they're setting it up for the legalization of same-sex marriage. What could happen here, and the one thing I want everyone to keep in mind, that in the DOMA case, the Windsor versus the United States case, keep in mind Edith Windsor is legally married. She was legally married in Canada. She lives in New York, where marriage equality is legal. Her suit against the United States isn't asking to be legally married. It's to have the federal government recognize her legal marriage vis-a-vis the Internal Revenue Service, because when her partner of 42 years died, she owed $363,000 in federal estate taxes that she would not have to pay if her spouse had been a man.
And that's a great point, because she was legally married in Canada, lived in a state that marriage equality is legal. So we're not asking in this case for them to affirm the marriage. It's just for them to affirm where she was legally married, that the federal government has to respect that, Richard.
Yes, that's true. But I think that the big picture we want to emphasize today is that we are at the beginning of the end of this struggle, perhaps, and that these cases are perhaps among the most historic that any of these justices will ever decide, because they are defining, right before our very eyes, what it means to be an American. What rights do you have as an American? And as you so eloquently said at the introduction to this segment, this is what we are about. This is the civil rights struggle of our time. In June, we're going to hear from the Supreme Court what that means.
Well, this is huge. Dustin, what we have seen is a shifting of public opinion. 9 states with same-sex marriage already legal in Iowa, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Washington State, going to be legal in 2013 in Maine and Maryland, and also Washington, D.C. From late November, should same-sex marriage be recognized? In favor, 53%, opposed, 46%. On and on, showing the shift in America. I know in 2003, when I first took a position, I get a much different reaction now than before. Do you think this growth in public opinion toward marriage equality is also, as Richard has said, something that the court now say we're ready to deal with this?
No, I think so. And I want to talk a little bit about why we're seeing that shift. And it's cases like, I'm aligned with the Proposition 8 case. And one of the amazing things that happened in it is that the opposition to gay marriage had to come into court and to raise their right hand and to say all the sort of lies and myths and stereotypes they usually say during ballot box initiative processes. And we saw that under oath, some of them refused to testify. Some of them, we proved it was junk science in the case. And really, the arguments fell apart. And one of the most notable things about this Proposition 8 case that's going before the Supreme Court One of the most notable things about it is that their one sole key witness opposing marriage equality has come to our side and did an op-ed in favor of gay marriage now. What happens when we tell our stories, when we share our stories, who we really are, and we dismiss those myths and lies and the stereotypes, and I hope we get to do that again at the U.S. Supreme Court very soon. When we get to tell those stories, we change minds. People actually get to meet us, and that's the power of the court. That's why I think it's so important gay and lesbian people use the courts to tell our stories where we are protected by that oath to tell the full truth.
And Jonathan, young people, I was startled at the numbers when polled 18 to 29-year-olds, 63% supported, about 2/3, and 35% opposing. And I think that says a lot, Jonathan.
Right. That means that, you know, for the young people, the people who will follow us, this is not a big deal. They're sitting talking to their friends, wondering why, you know, the grown-ups can't just get with it and see that this is something that is a no-brainer, that it is a civil rights issue, that same-sex couples should have every right and responsibility that comes with marriage, but should also have the dignity and acceptance that comes with that as well.
Well, we'll be watching this. This is historic, and let's not forget those that paid a price to bring this to this point. And all three of you have been in that movement, and certainly Harvey Milk, because of you, Dustin, should be remembered today.
That's right.
Richard,
thank you.
Dustin, and Jonathan, thank you for all your time tonight.
Thanks, Rev.
I hope you have you back on the show as we develop this. Coming up, new signs, President Obama's